All right, guys, we want to welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our preview and prediction for the Colorado Buffaloes going on the road to Fort Collins to take on Colorado State. 7-point line in favor of the Buffs, 58.5 is the total, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS. Looking at the Colorado offense, this is a group going into a game against Nebraska. We figured might have some struggles, but I certainly was shocked by how poor of an effort they put together as a whole. Only 10 points. Shadur, 57. As a team, they had a 57.5% completion rating, 244 passing. Of course, he had that interception. Did have a touchdown as well. They were down 28-0 at half. This offense could not get anything going, and of course, usually we refrain from personal opinions on Shadur, but I think it's kind of relevant this week following the stuff that happened, pretty much post-game, Nick, where, Shadur decides to hit the showers early. A couple minutes left in the game, he bolts, and then after the game, he pretty much throws his offensive line under the bus. And, has the offensive line been poor? Absolutely. But the lack of support for his teammates is incredibly overwhelming, Nick, and that's why I think it's, relevant for this week, is because, his actions affect the rest of this locker room. If you're not going to play for them, they're not going to play for you, and that certainly is going to hurt morale. Not a great look one bit, Nick, for Shadur, I would say. Great player, though. Had a tough game. I think he can bounce back this week, but the things we're talking about here could also affect the rest of this team and could lead to a poor performance on offense that just might not be as energetic.
Yeah, the hits keep on coming for Colorado. It seems like every single day they're in the news for another reason that's not a positive reason. Him leaving the field with 2 minutes left in the game was unacceptable, right? Flat out, that's the only thing I'm going to say. It was unacceptable. You cannot do that. You cannot abandon your teammates like that. You cannot go to the locker room before the game is done if you're not hurt. He was clearly not hurt. They could try and play it off and say he was. I think Dion said he wanted to get him checked out. There was nothing to check out, right? He left the game because they were losing. That's an embarrassing thing, and I hope NFL GMs are keeping an eye on that, because that's something that they should keep an eye on and watch, because this is a guy that if you're gonna use a high round draft pick on him, a top 10 pick on him, you got to understand that there are potential character concerns that come with that. There's also the thing circulating that Dion wants the band not play after a touchdown. They want to play his song in the stadium after he throws a passing touchdown, which is just kind of ridiculous to even think about. It's a complete circus. I said that in the preseason that this was going to be a circus out there in Colorado, and it continues to be that way. That interception he threw when they were backed up on their own goal line, I don't know what he was thinking with that throw. You can't make a throw like that at all. He was shocked that it was picked off in return for a touchdown when he basically put it in the defender's hands. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to me at all. He's a very solid player, phenomenal player, great athlete, but obviously his head is sometimes not in the right place. Throwing your O-line under the bus like that, yes, they've been very bad, and they will probably admit that as well. All 5 of those guys that are getting meaningful reps will probably admit they've not been very good, but you cannot throw your O-line under the bus like that. You cannot be a teammate like that, or lack the character to be a good teammate like that. It's certainly concerning. I don't know how they're going to fare in this game. A tough game for him. He's got to bounce back. I just don't know what that's going to look like.
And it's going to be much easier to bounce back with this group of weapons. We see him to praise every week. Travis Hunter, 242 and 3 scores, 224 yards and a touchdown for Jimmy Horn so far this year. Those guys have a combined 27 receptions through 2 games. Will Shepard and LaJohntay Wester were pretty quiet last week, but these are guys who are also immensely talented pass catchers. So this passing game, last year in this game, they absolutely cooked. And, they had a phenomenal week 1, like we said the entire offseason they would have a big game against the Bison. They did that when they played CSU last year. Almost had 350 yards, 4 touchdowns. So a very good group of pass catchers here and a good quarterback. Certainly morale might be a little bit lower, though. The thing for Colorado is the run game. Still dead last, Nick. 37.5 yards per game, is 134th in FBS. Their leading rusher is Dallin Hayden with only 52 yards. Will not be playing in this game. It does not appear, meaning Charlie Orfordal and Isaiah Gustav, those are going to be the top 2 rushers, it seems. But, they're not really running the ball too much anyways. And they can't really because of this offensive line. They have 23 attempts in the first game, 22 this past week. Jordan Seaton, a true freshman, he's probably going to be great, right? But obviously true freshmen the last couple of years, especially left tackle in college football, it's a very hard transition, right? So I certainly think there's a lot to be said when it comes to his struggles. I think the best lineman for them has probably been Justin Mayers at left guard. I think he's probably been the best pass protector. Khalil Benson actually has been quite surprising as well at his right guard spot, but on the interior, still a bit of a weaker unit. Hank Zalowskis at center, no good. Right tackle, Tyler Brown has struggled immensely. Overall, Nick, like you talked about, the offensive line has not been good, and it's now leading to their quarterback 2 weeks into the year bashing them. They need time to put things together right. A lot of guys they picked up in the portal, I think, are encouraging ads. And of course, Seton was a 5-star recruit. But I certainly think that we expect them to struggle, right? But they should probably be better at this moment in time than they are. And it's kind of concerning that this progression is going to be a lot slower of a rate than we anticipated.
It certainly is concerning. A lot of people in the offseason, and certainly a lot of Colorado fans felt that they'd plug this offensive line in and find instant success. You and I were more cautious about this and said it might take some time, although the results have been pitiful so far. It really has not been good at all for this offensive line. They're not able to run the ball at all. 1.7 yards per attempt so far this season, 37.5 yards per game. It's just not good enough when you look at that. It's very, very poor numbers. They're trying to run the ball 22.5 attempts per game, but they're not able to really do anything. And now Hayden is injured, and that is certainly damaging a running back room that is already extremely weak, in a room that we already have a lot of concerns about. The offensive line, I think Jordan Seton is going to be a star eventually, but he is getting roughed up, and that is expected for a true freshman left tackle. Khalil Benson, he needs to find some improvement. Tyler Brown needs to improve as well. Justin Mayers has to look better as well. The only part of this offense that really is looking good outside of Sanders is the wide receiver room that obviously is having some solid athletes there with Travis Hunter, who's having a great season so far, and Jimmy Horn. It's hard to get the ball to him, though, when you're getting knocked down over and over again, when you're getting touched and getting hit behind the line of scrimmage and not really giving any time for Sanders to do anything. If this O-line can, stand up a little bit and prevent some of this pass rush from Colorado State, I think Sanders will be able to torch the secondary, but I question whether or not he'll have the chance to even do that.
Now, looking at the Colorado State offense, I'm going to say this numerous times throughout the episode. It's hard to really get a good read on this team because week 1 they played number 2 ranked Texas, and then they just played this past weekend a Northern Colorado team that went 0-11 last year, Nick. So, I mean, that's two completely different ends of the spectrums in terms of opponents that Colorado State has faced. The run game, though, has been pretty good. Justin Marshall, second-year runner, had 100-plus against Texas, had almost 7 yards per carry against a woeful FCS opponent. They're averaging about $182 per game. So I think the run game, him and Keegan Holas, those guys are pretty solid in terms of running. In this offensive line for Colorado State, they've been pretty good. Savion Henderson was abysmal at left tackle last year. Has looked pretty good so far, in his second year. Alex Foster at left guard, though, has been abysmal. Jacob Gardner at center is a phenomenal player for them. Drew Moss, he's looking better at right guard. And then at right tackle, Aaron Karras, he's also been very bad for them. So the offensive line, they have some strengths. I think, the transition to the inside for Moss has certainly paid big dividends for him and this O-line. Going up against the defensive line, they haven't been able to generate much pass rush, but in terms of slowing down the run, Nick, Colorado's done a pretty respectable job of doing so. There's clearly a different, attitude for the Buffalo's D-line. How do you think the run game will do? And do you think this offensive line will be a good unit here? Even though, again, it's been really hard to tell. And I guess considering they played Texas and they still had a 100-yard rusher, I'd say it's a pretty solid unit.
I think this is a solid offensive line they have here. The Texas front seven is not a joke of a unit. They're a very strong physical unit. Justin Marshall being able to find success on the ground, I think, is a really good start for him. Keegan Hollis as well has been really solid for this team. He's got a rushing touchdown, 7.8 yards per carry. So I think they've been able to move the ball effectively on the ground, which is really solid, a good start for this unit. I do like what they have in the running back room. I think it's a decent enough unit. The offensive line, obviously, there are some concerns on the left side. Henderson's looked better. Foster has not looked good at all so far. Jacob Gardner's been really strong at center. I expect a big day out of him. Drew Moss and Aaron Karras on the other side. I want to see what they can look like. Can they hold up against this pass rush for Colorado that has had some success so far this season? We saw them have success against NDSU. If Colorado State's able to run the ball, I think they'll be able to control the time of possession and get the control they want in this game. They're not a bad team in terms of holding the time of possession here. And if they can run the ball, find success on the ground, that certainly is a key start for them.
And, of course, this is a team, they love to throw the football. They got a quarterback in Braden Fowler-Nicolzi who has been solid this year. On 44 attempts, completed about 52%, 239, a touchdown and a pick. About 119 yards per game on average, though. So it's certainly been, a slow start for the passing attack. Again, they played Texas. They played an FCS opponent where they ran on the ball very successfully, Jan. So it's been a slow, quiet start for this passing attack. We've really not seen much of them so far. Tory Horton put on a clinic in this game a year ago. He's questionable for this contest. They need him to go if they want to win. If he doesn't play, they're probably not going to. 133 yards, that is, on 16 receptions against the Buffs a season ago. One of the nation's best receivers. He is phenomenal. Alongside him, Caleb Goody, Vince Brown, Jamari Pearson, and Dylan Goffney, a veteran. A couple of different guys have been spreading the ball around too. Obviously the Colorado secondary has really struggled this season. This is a unit that is pretty good throwing the football, but so far this year we've not seen it, Nick. And again, Horton has to play for them to be successful, I would imagine. What's the read you're getting on the Rams passing attack? Because it really is kind of iffy.
No Horton. I think this is going to be a very long day for the Colorado State passing attack. This air raid system, I like to throw the ball a whole lot. I think the quarterback play has been all right so far. Nothing to blow your mind away. I think it certainly can be improved upon, but it's not been too bad. And again, when you play Texas week 1, that's a tough defense. They weren't going to do a whole lot in that game. Then they play an FCS opponent. Really tough to figure out. Horton's got to play, though, if they want to be able to win this game. Caleb Goody is a really solid piece. Expect him to get a fair amount of targets. I like what this passing attack can do. I would like to see them mix the play up, run the ball, try to chew clock like I was alluding to a little bit earlier, bail out some of this passing attack. But the secondary for Colorado has been weak at times. Maybe you can pick that apart if you're a Rams fan.
Yeah, last year, Fowler Nicolzi, he had 39 attempts per game, did have 16 interceptions as well, had almost 300 yards per contest. So they're going to air the ball out. I think they're certainly going to open things up a good bit in this one. Looking at the Colorado defense they'll be facing up against, like I alluded to, the defensive line certainly played much better. They're able to generate some negative plays, not so much in terms of pass rush, but 7 TFL versus some good offenses through the first 2 games each. So I think that's certainly very notable. BJ Green, a guy who's a phenomenal edge rusher. Chidozie Nwankwo has probably been the biggest standout up front for them. Deion Hayes, Shane Coates is playing better. I think this is a defensive line that's certainly going to continue to improve, Nick. Against the run, they've been a lot better. 157 allowed against NDSU, only 150 against Nebraska. I know the Cornhuskers had plenty of big plays in that second half. They were called back on penalties, but at the end of the day, they still shut them out in the second half, and a $150 on the ground is a very good number versus some pretty good offenses, Nick, that love to have physicality, that have experienced offensive lines. Colorado D-line is looking much better with all the transfers they have. What do you make of them so far? Do you think this is an opportunity for them to get exposed? Do you think they'll continue to uptick against some fair competition?
There's an opportunity to play strong against some strong competition. This is an offensive line that has some strong pieces, especially on the interior outside of left guard. So you want to see what they can do, what this matchup looks like for this defensive line. I've liked what some of these pieces have been able to do so far. I've been happy. Deion Haynes has been really good, 9 total tackles for him, a tackle for loss so far. So he's been a big dominant piece on this defensive line. Shane Coates has been really solid for them as well. He's a guy they're trying to rely on more. 4 total tackles and a tackle for loss through 2 games for him. I've been happy with him so far. BJ Green is a guy that they had high hopes for coming into this season. They want to see a little bit more out of him. He's got 1 tackle and a tackle for loss so far through the season. Obviously, you want to see a little bit more out of him. I think he still has yet to fully break out. They have some other decent pieces across the defensive line. I've been happy with the performance so far, but happy with the production. They've gotten some tackles for losses. They got in the backfield and are upping a stat that was really weak for them last year.
And of course, this linebacking group as a unit, it seems like they're playing with some better consistency. Trevor Woods, I think it was a target he got ejected for early in the game against Nebraska. You have a leader in Levante Bentley who's playing some very good football, I'd say, for them. Also want to see more consistency, though, out of that player, but I think he's the biggest leader for them so far. Nakai Hill-Green, he ended up playing the majority of those reps in Woods' absence. He had a very good game, I'd say, against Nebraska. So this is a linebacking court is certainly improving. They have to be good in terms of slowing down CSU's intermediate passing game, though. Got to be stout and tackling underneath. That's something they're going to do a lot of drags. I think that was the play that everyone was talking about last year where Colorado State with Horton kept doing that. That's why he had so many receptions. Drag. That's all they were doing, Nick, across the middle of the field. I can guarantee you, with how many times they throw the ball, they're going to look to do routes like that, early and often. So these linebackers will have to be key. Maybe not so much in coverage, but tackling has got to be ideal.
I think this is certainly a linebacking unit that has to step up and be a bit stronger in this game. I have been happy with some of their performances so far, but they got abused over the middle of last year against this team, and certainly Colorado State's going to look to do the same thing. Trevor Woods, he has 12 total tackles this year, tackle for loss. He needs to be a little bit better as a tackler, and obviously, got to avoid making mistakes like targeting and penalties like that. Levante Bentley, I've been happy with him, but I want to see more out of him. 10 total tackles, plus a tackle for loss and a sack, so decent numbers out of him. He's a good leader for this team. The quarterback of that defense, Jeremiah Brown, as well as another guy at linebacker that they want to see a little bit more out of him. He's got 5 total tackles. He's a solid piece in rotation. Need to find some consistency here. Need to be a bit more stronger and more consistent and wrap up complete tackles and have a strong showing here in the middle.
Now you look at the secondary, they will be without Shiloh Sanders with an arm injury. He'll be out a couple of weeks. Colorado, dead last in opponent completion percentage. Obviously not great because this is a talented unit. They're just certainly struggling to put things together. 76.8% comp rate allowed through 2 games. Only 477 yards. So they haven't been awful in terms of just getting burned downfield for big plays. But there's been way too much free space. Only 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Travis Hunter's obviously tremendous in the back end. He's a corner you can certainly lean on. DJ McKinney, leading tackler so far, playing very good. Cameron Selman Cray at safety. Right behind him, he also has 3 TFL. So this is a secondary that's certainly playing, with it has increased talent, I guess you could say, but they're not playing the best in terms of coverage. Preston Hodge, a player who's struggling in terms of tackling and run defense in the slot. I don't know. The secondary, Nick, they should be accomplishing a lot more. I think they're certainly going to showcase, improvements eventually. But guys like Savion Riley, Colton Hood, when they get on the field, I think those are guys you can certainly target. If Travis Hunter's having a poor game, though, which is pretty rare, certainly doesn't happen very often, but if he has a down game, the rest of this unit is definitely going to struggle with him. And you can say whatever you want about Shiloh Sanders as well, but that's a guy that's usually a tone setter. He's usually pretty stout against the run, a good tackler, a hard hitter. It's a guy that they're certainly going to miss in the back end, Nick.
Shiloh Sanders is a great tackler, and losing him, he's got 11 tackles so far this season, is a big loss. Hunter has 6 total tackles plus a tackle for loss and a pass breakup. Expect him to be a big piece in the secondary, trying to take a bigger role with Shiloh Sanders not playing due to injuries. DJ McKinney, I want to see a lot of him. He is the team's top leading tackler with 14 total tackles and a tackle for loss plus a pass breakup. Expect him to be strong in this game as well. They're going to have a couple different rotational pieces. Preston Hodge will get a lot of reps in this game as well. He's got 3 total tackles and a pass breakup while other pieces will play. I've been, pretty happy with this secondary. At times, in terms of tackling, they're not great against opponent completion percentage, which is certainly a problem. I think the tackling has been really solid, but they've been getting beat in coverage, which is really a big problem. No interceptions yet either. Got to find a way to force a turnover here, I think, in this game, and find a way to cut down on that opponent completion percentage, because that is a big problem for the secondary.
Yeah, another big problem. Only 2 sacks for this defense. Both came against North Dakota State. So that's certainly something you want to watch with them, is try to spark a pass rush against a team that's going to throw the ball a lot. Looking at the Rams defense, again, they played Texas and then an FCS opponent, 545 given up against the Horns, only 298 against UNC. This is a team last year, though, that was pretty average against the run. They were never awful. They gave up about 2,000 yards on the season, a couple of games of over 200-plus rushing. So I don't think this is a matchup, though, they're going to get burned in by any means. Colorado, they're just not very good at running the ball. Even if they play the worst defense possible, it just doesn't seem like they're going to be able to do it successfully. So I don't think Colorado State is going to be in for that much of a worry against the run in this game. Bayum Jock, Chase Wilson at linebacker, these guys are good. They're in terms of tackling and being efficient, they're good at that. But they've been horrid in coverage this season, Nick, and that's an area where Colorado, with these great receivers, is going to look to attack. And the Rams also don't have much of a pass rush themselves. Only 1 sack this year. Gabe Kershik, he's probably their best defensive lineman, has it for them. Guys like James Mitchell are going to have to step up. He's been really good, though, against the run this season. Kenyon Augers, a guy who's very young for them, has the team lead with 3.5 TFL. So this is a defensive line. I think they have some nice rotational pieces. Biggest things I'm worried about, though, lack of pass rush and the linebackers not being good in coverage. That's a recipe for disaster.
This is a bad unit in terms of getting pass rush. They're going against a very bad offensive line. It looks to be, who will have the better day. Kenyon Augers has been really solid. 7 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss for him. I'm really happy with that. Gabe Kershik has been really good as well. 6 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a sack. The transfer coming over and plugging right in immediately. He looks really comfortable there as a younger player off that right side. I really have been impressed with him. He previously was at Wisconsin. Seems to be working out solid so far. James Mitchell, want to see a little bit more out of him. He's a guy they're hoping will step up. 9 total tackles for him plus one tackle for loss. He's got to have a big game here as well. They got to get good pressure off the right side, particularly in my opinion. Can Kersick find really strong pressure off that right side? I think it's possible. If he has a good day, things would be solid for Colorado State.
And of course, this secondary, a unit that, I don't think is all that stout. Obviously they had a headache against Ewers in Texas. Who doesn't, quite frankly, but, last year, of course, they got torn apart in this game. Pass defense, so it was, less than stellar at times. They had good performances. They certainly, against some of the woeful competition they played, were able to kind of stat pad a little bit to end up looking better than they really were. But the more talented passing attacks really had their number. And, for example, in the season finale against Hawaii, a team that has good pass catchers but really struggled, they were able to tee off against the Rams. This is a secondary I'm certainly worried about. They have a guy in the slot in Dominic Morris who's been a great, efficient tackler for them. He's good against the run, but in terms of coverage, hasn't been all that good. The corners, Dom Jones, Elias Larry, Isaiah Isasima, they've not been all that good. I like what they have at safety and Jack Howell. Henry Blackburn, of course, he's the guy that laid that big hit last year. It was very controversial. Back to Howell for a minute. He's a guy that had, over 100 tackles last year. He's the tone setter in the back for them. Those are 2 veteran safeties they have, Nick. Those guys are going to be important in this game. Those are pretty respectable football players. Blackburn's been good against the run this year. Certainly wants to keep that up. Was able to get in the backfield at times last year, showed abilities of ball hawking. So they have good safeties. The corners not as much. I certainly think this is an opportunity where the lack of athleticism, though, might hurt them. But these DBs, they can get in the backfield, Nick. Those safeties especially. So that's going to be their role in this one, is trying not to get burned on a consistent basis and forcing some mistakes in the backfield.
They have to be strong in the secondary in this game. Try not to get burned. We saw them get burned last year in this matchup. There are some decent pieces in the secondary, some solid leaders. Henry Blackburn, Jack Howell are not bad players. Dom Jones, I think he's a solid player as well. He has 6 total tackles and a pass breakup. Chase Wilson has been solid for this team across the board. At linebacker, he's been really good, 15 total tackles plus a pick for him. Jack Howell has been good, 3 pass breakups and 10 total tackles for him. He's got to be strong. Expect him to have a big day here if this Colorado State defense wants to have a really strong performance. Obviously, if the offensive line holds up for Colorado and Sanders has a lot of time to throw, he's going to pick apart this secondary. But if they can find a way to get some sort of pass rush, bail out the secondary a little bit, things could be solid for the Rams here.
Under the tail of that tape, that team comparisons, quarterback and wide receiver going to the Buffaloes. I think their defensive line's a little bit more polished as well. Secondary, I'm really not happy with either of them. I'm just going to pick the more talented one, I guess, even though, again, I love those safeties for the Rams. I really think this is even at the end of the day. I'll give the slight nod to the Buffs because Travis Hunter's that big of a difference maker. Running back, I think it's kind of obvious at this point for the Rams. The O-line, again, another one. It's not really much of a debate. And then at linebacker, I'll go ahead and go with CSU as well. I think they have some nice players in the middle that have been more of a focal point for their defense than Colorado, even though they've probably been a lot more sluggish. Again, I alluded to them being very poor in coverage. So, pretty right down the middle, Nick. It's kind of even across the board for, in terms of who has an edge where. Do you agree with this? Would you flip-flop anything?
I think this looks pretty solid. I agree with this across the board. I think, DB, you got to give it to Colorado because I think Travis Hunter is that much of a difference maker. Quarterback, wide receiver, defensive line, all makes sense for Colorado. As Colorado State, they pick up their running back, O-line, and linebacker pretty handily. I think it makes a lot of sense. Maybe you want to argue linebacker, but I think the Colorado State unit's been a stronger unit and a stronger unit on paper so far. I like this comparison. I think it's very fair and valid.
The final thoughts in the prediction. Keys to the game for Colorado. The passing attack needs to get back on track. The run defense needs to continue to be a solid unit for Colorado State. Got to find Horton early and often. That's if he plays. Try and find pressure on the interior. I think that's where they're most vulnerable. And even Shitter, though, he's pretty good against pressure, so you got to be able to get home as well. You can't just get near him. Like we saw against North Dakota State, had some pretty impressive throws. I think this will be a close game, and I really think that Colorado State can win it. They almost won it last year. It's like 17-point dogs on the road. I just think the Buffalo's passing attack is going to be too much in this one. And I said it against the Bison. I think that's going to be ultimate difference maker. And hate to use the same thing, the same reason over and over again. But, it's very evident. I think the corners here are going to struggle to defend these pass catchers. The safeties, they'll make some good plays in terms of run stopping, but I think their lack of athletic ability might hurt them. And I think they'll get burned for some big plays. 38-34 for me. Shootout type of game here. I think this will be a good one. I think the Rams can win it, though. But the Buffaloes are just too talented in the receiving core. And this quarterback, he's going to have a big day.
I certainly think the Rams can win this game as well. I have a shootout as well, 42-32. I have Colorado winning by 10 and barely covering the spread. A lot of books have it in various lines. I see, 7 seems to be consensus. A close game is certainly possible. I think Colorado State can cover that. I think Colorado's going to win this one late, potentially with a walk-off, or potentially scoring a touchdown late in the game to pull away. Potentially maybe a walk-off based off of your score. This is going to be a close game. These are two teams that are solid teams. Colorado has a lot of talent, obviously, but they've made a lot of mistakes. They play undisciplined. They're playing a Colorado State team that is a bit of a wild card. Last year's game, nobody thought it was going to be close. Ended up going to multiple overtimes, and Colorado escaping that one late. So certainly, I think in Fort Collins, that Colorado State crowd is going to be very loud. They want to beat Colorado. That they would love to do that as a rivalry game, but also make a point considering all the attention Colorado gets in the national media. It's a very exciting game Saturday night. I'll certainly be keeping my eye on this one on CBS. They picked up a really solid game to put in prime time between two teams. Colorado obviously has all that media attention. Colorado State, they're a pretty feisty bunch from the Mountain West, a really solid unit. Excited to see this game go down in Fort Collins.
That's me for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.